It's okay to refresh your values if they no longer align to your mission or vision or strategy. All of our employees at every level across all of our functions truly understand the expectations that we have on them to be truly productive. You need a workstation, you need high-speed internet, you need a secure location. Don't rush communication. There is no such thing as over-communication.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Heroes of Hybrid Work. On today's pod, I'm very excited to welcome Tiffany Taylor, who is a People Resources Executive and the current Head of People at Canoe Intelligence, a company redefining the future of alternative investments with cloud-based machine learning tech. I think I got all that in. I'm excited to share that Tiffany's extensive career spans heading up the people function at very noteworthy Boston companies, such as Akamai, Aramark, Europro, Cengage Learning, DataZoo, Patient Ping, and AppQs. And that is a lot of amazing Boston tech companies. Tiffany has more than 25 years of experience in HR leadership and is passionate about providing strategic people consulting across the employee lifecycle, from recruit to retain, to develop, and people operations. And that's why she's joining us as a hero of hybrid work today. Tiffany, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
You got it. So let's start easy. Could you tell us a little bit about your background and your story and what made you so excited to join the people function?
Yeah, I've been in the people function since 1995, and the reason I got into it right out of graduate school is twofold. One, I wanted a career that spanned multiple industries. I didn't want to, feel like pigeonholed, if you will, in regards to, who I could work for. So the people function was attractive in that regard, and then just so attractive because I love helping people. So bright-eyed, newbie to corporate America. I still have a lot of the enthusiasm I did all those years ago for this function and for truly helping people and leading with empathy and compassion and being the bridge, really, of aligning of the people resources strategy to the business strategy. And I think it's really fun. It's hard at times. It's very rewarding. So that's kind of how I got my start.
So going back to what you said, though, I think that's really interesting. Sometimes in marketing, I find that, you're obviously the external brand builders, but I think in marketing, we also have to be internal brand builders, right, for our people. So what you said about if you weren't doing people, you would be doing sales. It makes a ton of sense to me. It feels like those two roles are extremely aligned today. I find them to be very similar.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit. So I was stalking you on the internet to try to find some of your prior interviews. And I found one with _VC, which I love that company too. You said a leader's job is to inspire, motivate, and create purpose for their team. Now that a lot of us are in these hybrid work situations, does that still hold true? And has the leader's job shifted at all, given the kind of our hybrid environments?
I think it absolutely holds true. And I think it's almost even more important to double down on those things in a remote environment. And just a little basic example, people can't see you walk in the halls or interact with you in the employee kitchen or, sit next to you in a staff meeting or in a company meeting. So you've got to up your game in that regard in this remote world that a lot of us have been living in, at least since 2020, if not before the pandemic.
Yeah, sure. So what are some of the ways that you've seen people do this right?
I'm still wondering if I'm coaching and consulting in the right way, but to me it's about connectivity. Canoe Intelligence is a remote first organization. So what we like to do is ensure at least once a year, we're bringing all of our employees together in person. We like to do that at the start of our year so that we can align on our business strategy, really understand what the mission and the vision of the organization is for that year. Be together, build relationships, leverage relationships, have some fun, and really take that energy and that engagement back and keep it as hot as we possibly can for as long as we possibly can. The way that I like to consult to my organization to keep that alive is by focusing on remote connectivity on a monthly basis. And what I mean by that is, let's just take June, the month that we're in currently. We have two offerings that I would put under the remote connectivity umbrella. So not necessarily to do with Canoe business, but the connectivity of our employees. So we're offering a Juneteenth event on June 18th. We're offering a Pride event towards the end of the month, but opportunities for you to come together and participate in a game or education or a learning with folks that you might not interact with in your normal day-to-day life and in your job that you do. And I think that's so important, especially for these emerging growth companies. You know, we're hiring like crazy. We're bringing on about anywhere from 5 to 10 people a month. So it's so important that we get to have a sense of one another and have opportunities to build relationships. So the remote connectivity piece, I think, is absolutely critical, and something that my team especially, is focused on with the full support of the leadership team, understanding, again, how important those connections are to keep your engagement high. And we all know an engaged employee is a more productive employee. So anything that we can do in that regard, I consider critical work.
Yeah, no, definitely. Some people I've heard say that, you have that in-person moment to charge the battery, and the battery stays charged with, intermittent remote, events, right? And then, you go back to the beginning of the next year and you charge your battery again. So that makes a lot of sense to me that you would have that at the beginning of the year to kind of kick it off, like a sales kickoff. Again, going back to our metaphor earlier. So.
Exactly.
Yeah, so you talk about the two most important things you look for in a leader, and it's followership and learning enablement in that same interview that I found. So again, in a remote environment, I mean, even for me, it is extremely difficult to kind of foster these two things. You have to be extremely intentional, right? So how are people showing up in these two ways, and what are some tips you could give our listeners to continue this leadership journey, even when you're not seeing each other face to face?
Yeah, I think it's important, if you do have the opportunity to just get your team together in person, that you do that. If you can carve out some budget, if you can, push or pull some levers within your budget to do that. I just had my team together 2 weeks ago in Boston for a 2-day offsite. And we even ended that 2-day offsite by inviting the rest of the Canoe folks that live in the Boston area to come together to get dinner and then to go to a Red Sox game. So again, just an opportunity to be elbow to elbow and chatting with folks about anything, nothing specific to work, doesn't have to be, but just about, building relationships and understanding connections that you might have with someone. I was sitting to the left of me at the Red Sox game was our VP of security. And on the other side of our VP of security was a gentleman on my team that works in talent acquisition. And just overhearing some of their conversation about their love of the guitar and their love of music, and me feeling so happy walking out of that evening, feeling like so many connections were made because we put forth an effort to get folks in person for something, like dinner, like a Red Sox game.
I love that. And those moments used to happen so much more easily and so much more often, right? I remember walking by someone's office and asking them how their kids were or how their dog's doing. And with remote life, you don't do that, right? You don't put 10 minutes on there. Like I always joke we should have like an office walk by 5 minute meeting or something just to, right? Because we literally don't check in with people unless it's, a traditional meeting on the calendar. And I think that's really, really important. So that makes a ton of sense.
I love what you just said, though, Jenny, with being intentional, because I think that's exemplified in this remote world. And I always start my one on one. So I'm a big one on one fan. I think if folks aren't having a lot of one on ones, they should perhaps reconsider. And, I have weekly one on ones with my executive staff in my direct reports. I have bi weeklies, skip meetings. I have monthly meetings with our senior leadership team, quarterly meetings with people managers, and I leverage Donut Chat to the nth degree to just have random pairing one-on-ones. But every meeting that I have, I start off with, how are you doing? How's your family doing? I was on a call yesterday, one-on-one yesterday, with a senior leader in our engineering organization. And the first time that I met him at the all company meeting to start the year, he told me about his 5 children and his 5 kids' names. And I remembered to write his children's names down and really try to commit them to memory, because I think if you can make a connection with an employee and ask them how their life is outside of their day to day at your company, there's something magic in that. And to be able to get on the phone and say, how's Hannah and Elizabeth and Abigail and Noah and Benjamin? He was like, wow, they're awesome. How did you remember their names? And it's not about patting yourself on the back or anything like that. It's about making those connections intentionally to draw more of a connection between you and the person that you're speaking with.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's almost like when we were in person, you almost didn't feel the need to. It was just maybe more natural. And now you realize, like you keep saying, you have to double down on it because it's just not natural to continuously make an effort. It really is not. Um, so I think what we're talking about here too, a little bit, is a nice segue into building company culture in distributed workforces, hybrid, remote. Um, you've given me some really great examples of how you build culture. Are there other ways you found that are helpful, especially in your remote first environment?
To double down on your values. Christina Lacconi said it best. She's someone I admire in the field, in the Boston. I know you folks spoke to her, but in the Boston, New England, even greater New England people strategy community, she's always raising the bar and setting what I think are just amazing expectations for how we should all show up as heads of people. And she had a wonderful article that she put together on corporate values and how they need to not just be posters on the wall. And what does she mean by that? And what did she mean when she said you need to really truly thread the needle of everything you do through the lens of your corporate values? I couldn't agree with that more. That's the tethering. That's what keeps us really connected as to what it means to work for your particular company. And it helps employees understand the expectations that the company has on them. So giving out rewards and recognition when an employee lives and breathes the values that the company has set, making sure that you keep your company values fresh. It's okay to refresh your values if they no longer align to your mission or vision or strategy. They don't have to stay static. Incorporating them into your performance management process, into your promotion recommendation process, because it's not just about what the employee can do, it's about how they do it as well, which is so important. So I would double down on values if your company values, if you haven't already.
No, I agree with that. And I also think it's important to actually build in something about remote life into your values. Otherwise, I think that could get lost. So at SCETA, we have we are a community value, and what that means, right? And how to be hungry but still have a helping hand whenever needed. And
Hmm.
that I think that becomes more important to write that down in a remote world than in an in-person world. Right. It's just, if somebody is helping someone out, you can point to your values and say, you're living SCETA here. You're doing a great job. Right. And then that also helps to build that remote culture and the connectivity that you're talking about. But if you don't have
Absolutely.
community built into your values, that's tough, right?
It's very tough, and why we take it so seriously, not only as a new employee coming on, we have a whole section of our new employee experience training on values, the definition, and then a lot of different examples of behaviors of living our values. Like, what do we mean by excellence? What does Canoe Intelligence mean by excellence? What do we mean by one win together? What does 1 and 1 equals 3 mean? And how do I live that value? So we double down on the training. Let me take it back a step. We actually values interview. So we incorporate our values in the interview process. Once we've identified the right candidate for their skills and fit within not only being able to align with our culture, but help our culture thrive, bringing them on board is a very focused training on our values, and then threading the needle through everything that we do from a people's perspective: rewards, recognition, performance management, and promotion.
Very cool. Yeah, I love that. And I love Christina too. Is
Yeah,
just
she's
amazing.
just an inspiration. She is, for so many reasons.
Yeah, 100%. Awesome. So does it really matter where people actually get their work done?
Yes, I really believe that it does. We are on the precipice of sending out some updated expectations around what does remote first mean. To Canoe Intelligence, it doesn't mean travel the world. It doesn't mean go from coffee shop to coffee shop in one country to the next. We really feel that being remote first offers a ton of flexibility, takes the commute out of the equation, but that to be truly productive, you need a workstation, you need high speed internet, you need a secure location, you need a quiet location at times. So we definitely want to make sure that all of our employees at every level across all of our functions truly understand the expectations that we have on them, so they know, what to operate within.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. And I think it's something we should also double down on is setting expectations so that people can do their best work. Because if you don't
Yes.
give any parameters, I really feel like we do people a disservice because they're actually anxious about
Yeah.
if they're showing up, there's presenteeism, there's all this, all these biases around it. And if you don't do it, then you're leaving people in a not a great space, right?
Absolutely. The other
Yeah.
thing that might sound kind of elementary or even silly is when we have a company meeting, we want everyone to be on video. Don't have your video off. We understand you might need to click it off for a minute here or there if you're eating a bite of a sandwich and feel awkward doing that on video. But we think it's really important when we do when we do get together, to have our videos on and to be present and to be able to see how a particular communication is landing on an employee, if you can catch their body language. So there is a lot going on in the Boston, even the Boston CPO network, through various emails of, hey, how are you folks doing this, and getting folks aligned with the expectation, have video on more than they have it off. And it is, surprisingly, maybe to some, is still a challenge. And not everyone comes with their video on. So that's part of our doubling down on the remote expectations as well.
Yeah, totally. I don't even, I haven't been on a meeting without video in years. And I would find it very strange if someone showed up not on video. I don't even know how I would react. I'd be like, what's going on? What's going on? Where are you?
Yeah. Yeah. Are you with us? Are you with us?
Yeah. Well, I think no, I think you're definitely on the right track there. I'm very aligned with what you're saying. So our listeners are dealing with a lot of ambiguity when it comes to crafting their hybrid work policies. How do you best manage the ambiguity? And we've covered some of it with setting expectations, but are there other ways that we can manage ambiguity with our teams?
Yes, I think there is way to manage ambiguity. I like to try to be as transparent as possible. I'm a transparent leader. I feel like it is my job to be transparent so that my folks have as much information as they can to do their jobs effectively. So from an ambiguity standpoint, I never want anything to be ambiguous to my employees on my team or in the greater company. And so I try to make sure that communications are in as much context as possible and as black and white as possible. And I really would advocate for, finding some employees, volunteers in various departments to be your eyes and ears as a kind of a draft run of a communication or how it's going to land. I have found when I have incorporated that step, it's really, really helpful to hear from different folks. And you want to be, I'm somebody who's very collaborative, so I like consensus, but there is a point where consensus actually can work against you. And it is, you're running a business, it's business first, what's best for the business. But I always like to ask myself, what's best for the business, what's best for the employee, and try to align those as best as I possibly can, because I want my employees to be happy and feel fulfilled and informed. So don't rush communication. And there is no such thing as over communication.
Yes.
We have to remember that on average, you need to hear something new 7 times for it to sink in. So getting one email or hearing something once on a company meeting is not enough. It's not even scratching the surface. So, try to have some folks again that are, maybe they're high potential employees, and this could be a special thing for them to be involved in and helping preview communications to distill ambiguity if possible. Also, what's worked really well is waterfall communication. So once your most senior executive team decides on a direction, comes up with a draft communication, how does the next level down feel about that? And what is their input? And so forth and so on before it goes out to everybody. So we have to always think of our employees and always lead with empathy and compassion for the audience and how our communications as business leaders are going to land on them.
I love that. I don't know if you know Jim Spertolozzi at PI, but he always used to say, leaders are repeaters.
Yes,
Leaders
Jim.
are repeaters.
Yes.
I'll never forget that. And then there are some employees who are like, you have said this 20 times. And I'm like, not everybody's like you.
Right.
You're
Right. Exactly.
You're taking it all in here. But then there's that maverick over there who needs to hear it 25 times.
25 times. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Forget 7.
Yeah. I also really, something resonated with me about, picking people out in teams, and like having, team level communication. And also that's also been repeated on this show a lot, is how you leave some decisions on the team level and then bubble up the feedback back to the senior leadership team. So picking somebody out like a high performer and really kind of letting them in the tent and, helping out with communication in that way. I don't think I've actually thought about that in a while. So that's a good one.
Yeah, it makes them feel special, and
Yes.
who doesn't want to make someone feel special? I think that is such a gift
Yeah.
if you can effectively do that for someone.
Yeah, no, I love that. So we're getting to time here, Tiffany, and something I just like to end with everybody is, you probably came to this interview wanting to say something, but I probably didn't ask the right question to get it out of you. Is there anything you want to leave the audience with regard to hybrid work and any lessons learned or anything that you want to leave us with?
Gosh, I'm still learning. Every day I am learning. And, what I like to tell people is if you mess up or you fail, fail to me stands for first attempt in learning. Just own it, learn from it, and pivot. And sometimes speed isn't sometimes it's more of a marathon versus a sprint, and you have to know when to sprint and when to jog. But try things on, and if they don't work, just pivot and go in a different direction. It's okay, and your employees will appreciate that. I think just being your authentic self and being accountable for when you mess up and saying when you messed up, it makes you. I think it makes you more approachable as a leader to your employees. So eating a slice of that humble pie each and every day, I think is really, really, really important.
I mean, I think that's the greatest reminder that you can give people is it's okay to fail. Fail fast. Fail
Fail
fast.
fast, learn from it. Some of my
Yeah,
greatest learnings have been from falling flat on my face.
so
I just
true.
try to not make the same mistakes. I
Sure.
certainly have made the same mistakes. So, I really get on myself and get after myself. I'm my own worst critic in that regard.
Perfect.
But it is a way to learn as well. So take it as that. Don't look at it as negative.
Definitely. So last question. How can people find you if they want to dig into any of your insights?
Yeah, LinkedIn's probably the best way. I'm under Tiffany M. Taylor on LinkedIn. My company is Canoe Intelligence, so you can find me through their website as well, or just Tiffany at canoeintelligence.com if you wanna send me an email.
Awesome, Tiffany. Well, thank you so much. It was a huge pleasure meeting you today. We should definitely go get coffee at some point. We're not very far away. But thank you for joining us on the show, and we'll see you next time, I guess.
Thanks, Jenny. Thanks for having me. It was fun.